Let's look at if this procedure is complete. It took 46 seconds to complete because of underestimation of memory. When SQL Server underestimates memory for hash join, there will be either hash recursion or bailout. Recursion is slow, bailout is very slow. Let's look at a different example now. Let's go to the sort. This is a similar query we executed in the last webcast, but this is part of a store procedure. So we create a store procedure, and inside we do an order by. Let's create the store procedure and let's execute this query. First time I execute the query with January 1st, 2005 and 31st January 2005. The query is slow. Let's look at the execution time. 400 milliseconds of CPU, 3 seconds execution time. The query was spilling to TempDB. Let's enable sort warnings. Let's execute the query again. There you will see sort warning. Our query has a max degree of parallelism set to 1, so it is just one thread that does the sort. Let's execute the query again with half the amount of rows. 15th January 2005. Let's clear the profiler output. Let's execute this query. The query is fast, 90 milliseconds, and you don't see any sort warning because in this case SQL Server estimated more rows than actually sorted. So if you move here, you see SQL Server estimated 43,000 rows, only 20,000 rows were sorted. So there was enough memory to avoid spill to TempDB. But when you execute our first query, SQL Server estimates 43,000 rows and sorts also 43,000 rows, and we found out sometimes this is not optimal. You have to use optimize for if you are executing a query. But in a store procedure, if the store procedure was optimized for certain range values, and if you use it for a lower range value, you are safe. You do not spill to TempDB. But in case if you call the store procedure with a larger date range than what you called it initially, surely you are going to hit the TempDB. Now you will see this query took 6 seconds to complete, 578 milliseconds of CPU. The rest of the time was spent in writing to TempDB. Our store procedure was optimized to optimally sort certain number of rows. Anything more will lead to sort spill over TempDB. We are not talking about bad execution plans being cached. These plans are nearly the same. We are talking about fixed memory allocation for these plans. And again, plan guides will not help you here, which we will talk about later. Think about it. If you are using store procedure or other plan caching mechanism like SP execute SQL, prepared statement using ADO.NET or OLEDB based executions, for these memory allocating queries, and the first user calls these store procedures with 1 month date range, the optimizer will estimate enough memory based on the rows within this 1 month date range and cache the plan. Every other user calling the store procedure will be limited to that amount of memory. If they exceed the number of rows in that date range, they will spill to TempDB, bringing down the performance significantly. Let's execute this query in a loop and let's monitor the status and wait type. Our session is 72. Let's disable execution plan. Let's execute again. Let's monitor our session 72. There you see, status is running, wait type is null. The query is not waiting for anything. The query is using CPU. Let's now execute our slow query in a loop. Let's monitor activity of session 72. There you see status suspended, wait type IO completion. Let's take a deeper look. Let's stop this loop and let's execute this query like before. Reset wait stats, execute our query and find the IO completion wait time. Let's execute. There you see IO completion wait time is 0. This query did not wait for IO completion wait type, that is writing to TempDB in this case. Let's execute the next query. We know this query is writing to TempDB and it's waiting for IO completion, but I want to find out how long is the IO completion. You see 5.9 seconds and the query executed 6 seconds. If you look, there is some amount of CPU usage. If you take the CPU usage and add it to the wait time, you will arrive at the duration of this query. This query primarily waited for IO completion wait type. Let's search books online for IO completion wait type. There we see it again on DMOS wait stats. Let's look for IO completion wait type. Occurs while waiting for IO operations to complete. This wait type generally represents non-data page IOs. Data page IO completion waits appear as page IO latch waits. Not very useful. Let's check the internet. Let's search for IO completion and the keyword suspended in the site social.msdn.microsoft.com. This is a place where we can search over news group articles. There are 7 hits. This is interesting. Query status is suspended. Let's look at what this is about. Here is some question and the answer is right away. In these news groups, they move the answers to the top, so you don't need to search for the answers. Let's look at the real question. I just checked sysdm exec requests, like what we checked. There are 2 suspended. One of them has a wait type of IO completion and the other has a wait type of sleep task. Interesting. Exactly what we have. Let's see what the answers say. IO completion is a disk bottleneck. The IO completion is a disk IO problem. No amount of database tuning will fix this issue. You need to look at your hard drive and see how to make them faster. Mr. JLR tells me these are moderators who have years of experience, the authoritative people, and they are sending others to the hardware store to buy additional disks. Mr. JLR told me in the PASS Summit 2000 Spotlight session and 24 hours of PASS session, the PowerPoint slide bullet point states page IO latch wait, write log wait, and IO completion waits indicate slowness reading or writing data to the physical drive. These are definitive signs that you have a problem with your storage subsystem or drivers. Mr. JLR told me it is very easy to look at the past PASS Summit PowerPoint slides. He asked me to visit this website softconference.com/PASS. There he asked me to choose either PASS Summit 2009 or 2008. I chose 2009. There he said you can choose on the keywords of a session. So when I clicked wait stats, there was this capturing and analyzing file and wait stats. Mr. JLR asked me to click on this link, and there he said you can view the PowerPoint slides and the example scripts. Mr. JLR told me that he doesn't want to go to the hardware store. He wants to keep the money and give himself a bonus and go on a vacation. I told Mr. JLR sometimes you can rewrite the query and avoid IO completion waits. Sometimes you might want to go to the hardware store when you got IO completion waits. In that case, you have to find the right hardware. I will show you an example, but before that, let's conclude the procedure caching issue. I recommend not using stored procedure or other planned caching mechanism for memory allocating queries unless the cost of recompilation is significantly higher compared to the penalty of spill. It is rare that compilation time can be higher than the spill. It is easy to find out the compilation time. When you go to the execution plan, right-click, Properties, there you will see Compile CPU and Compile Time. If you are confident that the number of rows handled by these memory allocating queries are nearly the same, irrespective of the parameter, irrespective of the predicate, then you can use stored procedure for these memory allocating queries. It is like sending our drunk driver over a rail. They will reach the destination. Let me show you one more example of IO completion wait type. Let's begin a transaction and let's update less than 50,000 rows. SQL Server updated 49,999 rows. Let's do a rollback. While the rollback is running, let's look at status and wait type from DM exec request like before for our session 76. In addition, we will look at % complete and estimated completion time. Let's do the rollback and let's monitor. There you see status rollback, wait type IO completion, percentage complete, 49%, 59%, 65%. When SQL Server reads from transaction log to read rollback information, it will wait on IO completion wait type. Let's now begin the transaction, update the rows again. This time we will do a rollback, but we will monitor how much time was spent reading from the transaction log. So again, you can monitor and it will show % complete, how long this rollback will take to complete. In 1 second, less than a second, the rollback is complete. The estimated completion time seems to be very accurate in this case. And when you look at it, the query took 14 seconds to complete, not the query, the rollback, and 13.3 seconds was spent on doing IO completion. Let me show you one more example from the internet where we were searching for IO completion and suspended. There is the second question, IO completion status suspended. Let's right click, open in new tab. Let's look at the answers. There is the answer. The moderator says IO completion, this is a physical disk wait. Something is not right with your disks and the operation is having to wait on them. It's the same answer, but I will show you an interesting question. Restore taking forever. This is an interesting question. Let's look at it. Lately, restores are taking forever on SQL Server. When I look at the activity monitor, while restore is in progress, I see the session. That session is marked suspended and there is IO completion waits. And here is the answer. IO completion wait type comes up when the system is waiting to read non-data pages like GAM, SGAM, IAM pages. From the wait type, it is pretty clear that you have IO issues. How many disks do you have, and is the backup and the data files are on the same drive? I think you may need to add more disks to handle the IOs. I will show you an example where restore takes a long time waiting on IO completion. IO completion during restore or during rollback says SQL Server is waiting to read from transaction log. In this case, no query rewrite will help. You got to go to the hardware store and buy faster disks if your customer wants the rollback to complete faster. Rollbacks happen very rarely. Personally, I think most database systems are not optimized for rollbacks. I think there is no need. I think no application is designed to perform frequent rollbacks. Even though we have lots of memory, SQL Server did not keep the rollback information in cache. That is the reason it is reading from transaction log file. If rollback performance is okay, then you can keep your money for the bonus. The other issue here is transaction log disk is almost always optimized for writes, but rollback is a read operation over the transaction log. I will show you an example where restore waits for IO completion wait type in a moment. Meanwhile, Mr. JLR told me the fourth candidate who never attended a PAS summit before the election was not elected for the PAS board. I told Mr. JLR this might all be a pure coincidence and he is just cooking this connections thing up. He asked me to search the internet for the keyword PAS fail. So I opened the Internet Explorer and I typed PAS fail SQL and hit the search. Mr. JLR asked me to click on the first link from SQL team. Right click, open in new tab. There he pointed out, I will say that the nominating committee failed the PAS membership badly. The failure was not in allowing this person to run. On the contrary, I think a controversial candidate is great since it lets the member decide exactly where the organization should go. The failure was in limiting the slate to just 4 candidates for 3 open positions. I do recall from history and civic that some political systems have the exact number of candidates as officers, but I don't remember the exact term for such a system. Democracy certainly isn't the right term. Community organizations should have leaders chosen by the community. This is not the case with this election. The problem is 4 people and 3 positions is a final round of musical chair, not a board election. Mr. JLR pointed out few feedbacks on this blog entry, spot on by an industry expert. One more industry expert. The PAS board process has been a failure for years. I tried to run 2 or 3 years ago and was not allowed to because I was told I didn't volunteer enough. I tried to volunteer and my emails, several of them, were never returned. Since that time, I have seen board members who were allowed to run and who even got elected, who have much less of a history with the organization than I do. After watching the board, I am actually glad I didn't get the chance to participate. It's too much work for too little return. But I am forced to question the black box, seemingly random process used to tell people whether or not they are allowed to run. Mr. JLR told me this person has a different connection. He asked me to open an Internet Explorer tab and key in this website. There he asked me to click here. There he pointed out this person's name. Let me show you the example where restore waits for IO completion. Let's create this database. Test 4. Let's use the database and let's create a table on this database. Let's insert 50,000 rows into this table. Begin tran, commit tran. So the transaction is committed after we insert the 50,000 rows. What I am going to do next is to begin transaction and update 25,000 rows. Out of the 50,000 rows we inserted, we are going to update less than 25,000 rows. Begin tran update. After the update is complete, before the commit transaction, I will take a backup. I will call this backup test4UC. So we remember this backup file contains uncommitted transactions. Once the backup completes, we will execute commit transaction. And we will do one more backup. This time we will call the file test4C. So we can remember this backup file contains committed rows. Now we will go and restore. First we will restore test4C. We will restore in a different database name. Our file test4c.back. The data file is located in the D drive and transaction log file is located in the E drive. We reset the wait stats and we monitor IO completion and page IO latch EX waits. While we restore, we will monitor what our session 80 is waiting for: status, wait type, percent complete, and estimated completion time. Our session ID is 80. Let's execute this and let's monitor the request data structure. There you see backup thread, restore complete. The restore was very quick. It took 7 seconds and IO completion was 970 milliseconds. Very less, negligible compared to the restore time. Let's now restore this database. Our file test4UC, the backup file that contains uncommitted transactions. The same drive, different database file name MDF, and in the E drive we have the transaction log again. While I restore this database, SQL Server will do the normal restore of the data file, then it will read the transaction log and start rolling back the transaction. Let's execute this restore and let's monitor our session. There you see suspended backup thread. Up to 7 to 10 seconds it will be suspended backup thread because it is a normal restore, and after that the rollback starts, where you see the IO completion wait type. It is reading from the transaction log to see the 25,000 row changes, so it can roll back those changes. Now you see the query took 27 seconds, or the restore took 27 seconds. IO completion was significant, was 10 seconds. The query was waiting for the transaction log IOs to complete for 10 seconds. So IO completion means different things on different scenarios. Sometimes you can rewrite the query. Sometimes you have to go to the hardware store and buy the right disk, the transaction log disk in our example. Some people think all the wait type can be documented. Think about it. As a DBA, you see lots of IO completion waits. What do you conclude? Memory issue? Slow read over transaction log disk? Or other reasons that you don't know yet? Mr. JLR told me that he thinks third-party software monitoring tools don't suggest you to rewrite query to address memory issues. Rather, they all advise you to buy more disks. Well, I am not sure, as I have not used these monitoring software tools. So I will let the webcast viewers test these third-party monitoring software tools to decide for themselves. Mr. JLR asked me, what about the sleep task wait type, like IO completion wait type? If sleep task wait type means different things on different scenarios. I told him yes. In some cases, sleep task means memory pressure. Sometimes it means disk IO pressure. Sometimes it means CPU pressure. Mr. JLR asked me if I can show another example of sleep task. I told him yes, I will show another example. It is more interesting to see the sleep task example associated with CPU pressure than disk IO pressure. I demonstrated an example where sleep task is related to disk IO pressure in the level 400 session I delivered at the SQL Bits conference. SQL Bits conference that happens in UK is the largest European SQL Server conference based on number of attendees, where I shared the Best Speaker Award with David Mowry. We were voted as the best speakers. I will show the CPU pressure example here. Mr. JLR told me, since I am from Europe, I should take a look at the PAS European team. He asked me to go to the PAS website. There he asked me to move the cursor over About PAS and click on Board of Directors. There he asked me to scroll down and look at this person who is the EMEA director, Europe, the Middle East and Africa. He pointed out this person is from this organization and he is part of German SQL Server user group. He asked me to look at the who is record of SQLPass.de. There he pointed out the SQLPass.de is registered under this organization name, and he asked me to look at the website of this organization. So I opened a new tab, pasted the website, and he asked me to click here. Then he pointed out the organization and he said he is linked to this organization. He asked me to click here and he said they are all connected. Mr. JLR then asked me to check out Swiss user group. So I went to the who is record of SQLPass.ch. There he pointed out Charlie. I told Mr. JLR that I know Charlie. I met him before. He is organizing this new Swiss chapter. He said Charlie organized a SQL Saturday event. I told Mr. JLR it's a lot of work to organize such events, and Mr. JLR asked me to visit the SQLSaturday.ch website. So I opened this website and there he asked me to go to sessions. I clicked on sessions, then he pointed out this session SQL Server metadata logs. He asked me if this looks like a sponsored session. Let's read what is the abstract. SQL Server metadata logs, the unknown log. Metadata are stored on several places in SQL Server for several kinds of objects and for several purposes. While being accessed, they can be locked and lock wait time occurs. Where are the metadata stored and how are they locked? Why and how they are accessed? How do you detect these kinds of locks and how can you avoid them? Take a look at these interesting internals. I told Mr. JLR from the session title, abstract and color code, it doesn't look like a sponsored session. I told him the session looks interesting. I missed it. Mr. JLR asked me not to worry and click on the agenda. So I clicked on the agenda. Then he asked me to scroll down and click on the PDF file for the SQL Server metadata logs sessions. So I open this in a new tab. Mr. JLR asked me if I noticed the connections. I said no. This person delivering the session is from this organization, but this is an interesting session on metadata. I don't see any connections. Data about other data. You know, I'm always uncomfortable when people are talking about data about other data. If there is a session like this, I will just walk in. Let's see what is here. Where are metadata stored? Master DB, resource DB. Interesting, some deep stuff. Differential changed map, DCM. Interesting, lot of stuff. What if you could monitor the actual workload on the database? Interesting, we can use the activity monitor. Go back and see what was happening at any point in time. The management data warehouse, the MDW. What is this? Doesn't look like management studio. Doesn't look like management studio. Then Mr. JLR told me this is a third-party software screens and not SQL Server Management Studio. I told Mr. JLR I know Charlie personally and I will ask him next time I meet him. Mr. JLR tells me most of the user groups are led by non-users, consultants, consulting companies, trainers, like in Denmark. He asked me to look at SQLPass.dk, who is record. There he pointed out the website is registered under this consulting company. He says when consultants, consulting companies and trainers lead the user group, the problem is their agenda is different than what the real users want. Any user group managed by non-users are not optimal for users. Mr. JLR says most of these user groups deliver beginner level technical content and they charge for more or become a platform to promote third-party software. Let me show you the sleep task wait example. Here is a query that we saw during the preview. It's the same query. We are doing a order by, max DOP 0. Only thing I added is DBCC SQL perf. We clear the wait stats and in the end we select IO completion and sleep task waits right after the query completes. We also collect the date time before the query starts and right after the query ends so we can show date diff. Let's execute this query. The query is slow. Let's monitor the profiler. Let's stop and start the profiler. What we are monitoring here is the sort warnings. Let's execute the query again. The query is fast, no sort warning. All CPUs are pretty much idle. The query is fast. The query is fast. Let's look. Once in a while, when one of the threads process extra rows, then we have max DOP 0. So we have 4 threads running on 4 CPU cores. So when one of the thread exceeds the memory, it will spill to TempDB and there you have a sort warning. So you have the query now executing more than a second. We saw in the last webcast the simple way to solve it is either you increase the optimized for values. In our case, we will decrease the amount of rows we process. So we have enough memory so the query will always be fast. So when the query is slow, you will see the IO completion and the IO completion wait to be higher. There you see 2 seconds is the query execution time. IO completion is 1.9. Let's execute the query a couple of times to make sure the query always executes fast. The query always executes fast because we increase the amount of memory and we are processing less amount of rows. Now let's execute a CPU intensive query on the side. Let's go to the window. There we execute this query. Select count of star from products with max DOP 1. So this query will run in a loop spinning one of the CPU at 100%. There you see one of the CPU is being used 100% and the average CPU utilization is 25%. Now let's execute this query. We will also include the actual execution plan. The query will take a long time to complete. During previous session we saw the query take around 13 to 14 seconds and now it's taking around 13 seconds. There is no IO completion wait. Because we have enough memory, the query did not spill to disk. The sort did not spill to disk. We have now sleep task wait. It is around 12.8 seconds. The signal wait time of our sleep task wait is 12.8 seconds, and the query completed in 13 seconds. Let's take a deeper look. Let's look at the execution plan. Right click, Properties on the clustered index seek. There we see the amount of rows handled by different threads. We see thread 3 handle the least amount of rows, 12,000. The rest of the thread handle more rows because this thread seems to share the CPU core where our CPU intensive query is running. Let's look at how many pages are this 12,000 rows. In our case, the table has order description column character 2000. The rest of them are few integer columns and a datetime column. The row is around 2 kilobytes. A page will have 4 rows. Let's go to the calculator. Let's cut and paste this value in the calculator and divide by 4. This is the amount of pages that is processed by this thread. Let's multiply by 4, and this should be the execution time of this query. You see 12.6. Let's go to the results and let's look at it, 12.8. So we can guess the execution time of this query just by looking at the execution plan. There is no magic in my calculation. I will explain you the reason for this. This has nothing to do with memory or disk. The other CPU intensive query is bringing our query down. Once you understand the reason, it will be very easy to find a solution. Before that, I will share an advice Mr. JLR gave me. Mr. JLR tells me if I develop the right connections, then I have a chance to get appointed to the board and influence the PAS agenda for the next 10 years and subsequently appoint connected people as directors. I told him, first of all, I believe PAS should be a neutral organization. I told Mr. JLR I have no plan to become a director for too many reasons. First of all, I think user group institutions like PAS should be led by users and not people like me who are not real users. Mr. JLR asked me, what do I mean by not real users? I told Mr. JLR, anyone who sells something to the users are not real users. For example, I sell workshops and consulting services. Others might be selling third-party software or hardware add-ons. In the name of conflict of interest, I will stay out. I think everyone in my position should. If not, PAS will become a B2B organization. It should be a user-to-user organization and not a business-to-business organization helping businesses sell, increasing your TCO, total cost of ownership. I actually contradict myself here. You know, in the real world, real users have very little time and it is difficult for them to balance a user group management and do their day-to-day job. Mr. JLR told me there are exceptions. There are real users who are willing and ready to sacrifice their time for a good cause like PAS. Mr. JLR asked me to open the board of directors page. There he pointed me, the current president is from this organization. And this director is also from this organization. And he pointed out the newly elected member is also from this organization. Mr. JLR thinks the reason to become a board member and to sit in board meetings is to bring opinion from the user community. He doesn't understand why 3 people from the same organization have to sit on the board. Why can't they communicate within themselves and send one representative? Mr. JLR says in a for-profit organization, publicly traded companies, board members represent shareholders' interest and large shareholders will have more directors on the board representing their interest, but PAS is a non-profit institution. Mr. JLR says this way, some real users from the community have a better chance to bring their opinion to the board. He further points out, among the board members, this person and these two people are connected, and these two belong to the same organization. This leaves just two people independent who don't belong to this partnership. I would like to ask a question to the viewers. How will you handle such a situation when someone like Mr. JLR, in the name of free speech, pops up and asks you such questions with internet browser at their hand? Think about it. Write to us when you have some spare time. Mr. JLR also pointed out just 1% of the PAS members participated in this election. To be exact, 578 members participated in this election compared to more than 52,000 members PAS as. He says, maybe moving the election during the summit will have a better participation rate. Back to business. When I deliver a workshop or present a session in a user group meeting or conference, I strictly deliver technical content. For example, you can see that in my SQL Bits session recordings. But in these free webcasts, we include some side discussions that are not technical. This is our business decision. The query took 13 seconds instead of less than a second. Let me explain you why. Let's say we as a team are assigned to pick apples from certain number of trees and sort them. Since we have 4 CPU cores, we decide to use 4 threads, 4 people. Let's say I am the coordinator, my user is asking me to supply the picked apples in a sorted order. I employ 4 people, Maria, Dave, Tom and Matt, to pick the apples, sort them and hand them over to me in a sorted order. The process begins. I ask Maria, Dave, Tom and Matt for a single sorted bag of apples each. Consider a bag of apples like a page of rows. I start merging the 4 bags of sorted apples. You know, we cannot simply concatenate the 4 bags because each bag has them sorted. We have to preserve the sorted order and merge the 4 bags. When I am done with a bag from Tom, I ask him for the next bag of apples. He delivers the bag to me right away, and as a coordinator, I continue sorting. I have only one problem. Whenever I ask Dave for the next bag of apples, he doesn't supply it to me right away. I asked him why. He is always late while my user is waiting for the sorted results. Dave says, every time you want me to deliver just 1 bag of apple, which doesn't take a lot of time, maybe few microseconds. Every time after delivering the bag to you, I park the car. There is this other user, Sam, who takes the car for a ride to execute some CPU intensive query. We in our car sharing program have some agreements which says once you take the car, you can use it up to 4 milliseconds. Why 4 milliseconds? Select OS Quantum from sysOS sysinfo. There you will see the scheduling time in SQL Server is 4 milliseconds. So this Sam, every time I park the car, takes it for a ride and keeps it for 4 milliseconds. And I have to wait this 4 milliseconds before I can deliver you the next bag of apples. Think of Dave's car as the busy CPU core. I told Dave, I don't believe you. Maybe you are having a cup of coffee or on the YouTube. Dave told me I should check the signal wait time. This is the time he waited for the car, the CPU core. This is our signal wait time, 12.8. So this thread waited 12.8 seconds for being scheduled, and that's why the query took 13 seconds to complete. Dave says, just multiply the number of bags I supplied to you with 4 milliseconds. This is going to be the query execution time. That's what we did. We used the calculator. We found the amount of rows processed by this thread, divide by 4. We arrived at the total amount of pages. We multiplied by 4. There we saw the 12.6, which is nearly the signal wait time of this query. On top of all this, Dave tells me he is working hard and he is waiting for the bonus this year. I told him, look, if we don't deliver the results to the users on time, we all in our department will lose the bonus. I told Dave that we will conduct few more experiments and check out the signal wait time theory, and we will find a solution. Let's search books online for signal wait time. There is a hit again on SysDM OS wait stats. Let's see what is signal wait time. Difference between the time the waiting thread was signaled and when it started running. Not very useful. Let's search the internet for signal wait time. Mr. JLR pointed out I should look at this website SQLWebcast3Part2of3. How SQLWebcast3Part2of3 is different. There he pointed out how is SQLWebcast3Part2of3 different from books online or MSDN and other resources. Let's be clear, we do not replace invaluable resources such as books online, MSDN and other great forums, journals, blogs and periodicals that already exist. They do a fantastic job of delivering vast amount of information on SQL Server, and we have no desire to reinvent the wheel. That said, the information they provide takes you only so far. Mr. JLR said I should choose SQL Server Wiki and click on Performance Tuning. There I should choose Wait Events. There I should click on SysDM OS Wait Stats. There he said I should check out the signal wait time description. Total time spent in the runnable queue after resources necessary to execute a waiting request becomes available. You can obtain the total wait time spent waiting on resources by subtracting signal wait time from wait time milliseconds. Let's go to our example. There we see signal wait time is 12 seconds, wait time is 18. So when we subtract, we see it's around 6 seconds is the resource wait time. If signal waits are over 25%, yes, in our case it's over 25% of total waits, you can be fairly certain that your server has a processor bottleneck. Consider investing into faster processor or spreading the load across multiple servers. Couple of things. My signal wait time is more than 25% of total wait time. They say I can be fairly certain that my server has a processor bottleneck and I should consider investing into faster processor or spreading the load across multiple servers. Well, looks like this website also sends you to the hardware store, in this case to buy faster CPUs or more servers. Let me tell you, our server overall CPU utilization is not 100%. It is just that one CPU core that is at 100%. The rest of the CPUs are idle. I can also tell you, if you add additional CPUs, this query will not be running less than a second like we want it to be. Our goal at SQLWorkshops.com is to empower customers to fully realize the performance potential of Microsoft SQL Server. We will address this issue without increasing your TCO, without increasing your total cost of ownership. Mr. JLR pointed out some additional information about this website. He asked me to look at this page, SQL Serverpedia blog syndication FAQ. There he pointed out we don't put ads on the blog post or in the RSS feed. We could, but we don't, and we are really hardcore about this. Yes, it says powered by this organization at the top of the page, but I would hardly call that an ad. You can't even click on it. Mr. JLR says I should click one of the blog in this website and I should try to click on it. There he says the click in fact goes to their website. Mr. JLR tells me either they have to fix the click or change this FAQ article. Mr. JLR tells me some of the people who are writing the blogs and the columnists call themselves independent and are connecting here thinking there are no ads, but they have been duped. Mr. JLR asked me to check out another thing in this website. Initially, it was interesting that they are going beyond the books online, but it looks like they also sent us to the hardware store. But Mr. JLR asked me to click on SQL Server Wiki and Database Administration. There he asked me to choose Troubleshooting SQL Server. There he asked me to choose Examining Current Activity and Logs. There he pointed out, in addition to explaining about locking and blocking, they are mentioning that their product provides an easy way to troubleshoot blocking. So Mr. JLR thinks this is not an ad-free website. Mr. JLR says the people who connect here have the highest probability to be shortlisted as electable candidates for PASS board by the nominating committee based on last election process. 2 out of 4 shortlisted candidates were from here. Mr. JLR pointed out to an interview this person gave while standing for the PASS election. Meet PASS board candidate. And there he pointed out, if PASS put you in charge of increasing new membership, what specific steps would you take? I would make it free to join PASS. The interviewer says, they already did that. Why didn't anyone tell me? This person didn't know. I would immediately reach out to the community to find out what more PASS could be doing to help out. Mr. JLR says, joining PASS has always been free. They don't even know how they got into PASS. Now they are on the board. Mr. JLR says he has a suggestion to this person. Make the summit affordable like SQL Bits in UK, where the conference and the session recordings are free. Make the PASS summit affordable. It need not be free like SQL Bits, but affordable. Mr. JLR says the presenters and speakers at these PASS conferences are not paid. They are doing this on a voluntary basis. They pay their travel and accommodation expense out of their own pocket. Then why should PASS charge more than $1,000 each attendee for the summit and more than €1,000 each attendee for the conference and more than $500 for the session recording DVDs? The goal of institutions like PASS should be to make education affordable to every user. They can upsize the 24 hours of PASS to 72 hours of PASS. The advantage with 24 hours of PASS was the speaker did not have to travel far away for presenting. They recorded their presentations in their own office. It reduced the volunteer speaker's expense. And for the users, it reduced the cost. No travel, no fee, flexible schedule, watch anytime. The best way to avoid this performance issue is to avoid sorting over this busy CPU core. This can happen when CPU pressure is from a different application, external to the current SQL Server instance, like another instance of SQL Server with server consolidation, or from an application. This can be addressed by processing the query in parallel and sorting serially, or avoiding the CPU core that is busy and using rest of the CPU cores to process the query and sort in parallel. If you want to process the query in parallel and sort serially, you can create a temporary table and split the query into two. If you want to avoid the busy CPU core, then you have to partition the workload and execute CPU intensive query on certain partition and our parallel sort query on a different partition. This is well documented in books online. When you look for the topic how to configure SQL Server to use SoftNuma, there they explain how to create partitions and how to assign certain TCP IP ports to certain partitions. Let's execute our query with maxDOP3. Let's change the max degree of parallelism to 3 and let's execute our query. The query is slow. We need not wait so long. Let's try again. The query is slow. Let's stop it and let's try again. What we are doing is, by saying maxDOP3, we are trying to avoid the CPU core. Let's stop it and let's execute again. This time the query is fast even though one of the CPU core is busy. By saying maxDOP3, we coincidentally did not use the CPU core that was busy. Let me show you an article from the news group. There is a question: performance problems when moving to bigger server. The question says, since about a week, I am fighting with lot of strange performance errors. We use a lot of SPs to fill data into a DB with approximately 30 gigabyte. On the dev server, a quad-core machine, some RAID drives, and 8 gigabyte RAM, this takes about 5 hours. On the production server cluster, the server gets stuck on a few of these stored procedures for more than 12 hours, although it is a way more powerful. 12 cores, SAN, 64 gigabyte of RAM. Interesting. There, a moderator asks for select top 10 from DM OS wait stats. Order by wait time descending. Interesting. This person sends the output. CX packet is in the top and sleep task is second. And if you see, the signal wait time of sleep task is very high. The moderator says, you definitely need to dial back your max degree of parallelism based on the wait stats. Try setting it to 4 and see how things work out. It gives the syntax how to set it. The person who asked the question says, I switched it to 1 for now and will increase it until it starts making problems again. This is what I mean by taking chances. So if he slowly increases, as long as he doesn't hit a CPU core that's busy, he will be fine. But with the same max degree of parallelism, the next day you might have a performance problem. I don't think anyone would like to take chances on their bonuses. Then why gamble on query performance? Now I will show you a worst case scenario where this query will execute more than a minute. Before that, let's complete the conversation with Mr. JLR. I told Mr. JLR that the bylaws don't allow them and it might be expensive to host 72 hours of PaaS. I openly asked Mr. JLR, why is he criticizing PaaS so much? Does he want PaaS to fail? Mr. JLR tells me, these bylaws were not written by our forefathers. They were written by the people on the board and they can change it any time. If 24 hours of PaaS was a success, then there is no doubt 72 hours of PaaS can be a greater success. Mr. JLR says, only if real users have an opportunity to become board members. The typical users who have no time to travel with very little budget and willing to learn, the day these real users become the majority at the PaaS board, the 2/3 majority to change the bylaws, these kinds of changes will happen. Mr. JLR says he wants PaaS to succeed. If this happens, education becomes the primary focus of these user groups, we can take on a greater challenge. We can really educate not just the users who have a large budget, all users with or without travel time and budget. Only then we have a real possibility to get Oracle and DB2 out of every data center. Mr. JLR says this should be the ultimate goal of user groups and non-profit institutions like PaaS, Professional Association of SQL Server. Mr. JLR asked me, why don't I go visit news groups and correctly answer the questions? I told Mr. JLR I don't have time to visit every news group and answer performance-related questions. If independent institutions like PaaS host a content website where people can contribute, a single place to look for, I will contribute there. I would like to contribute on an independent content site as I am an independent consultant.